everyone. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I feel a little out of practice. Welcome to our second CME Palooza Spring session. I am Derek Warnick, one of the other co-producers, along with Scott Cover of CME Palooza Spring. And I'm going to bring up the slides so you can all see. This is our 2 scoops of chocolate chip cookie dough, please session, my favorite title of all the sessions that we have. And this one is sponsored by ASIM, and we thank them very much for their sponsorship. And moderating this particular session is Karen Roy, principal and co-founder of Infograph Ed and principal of our Gilling Group. How'd I do with my enunciation, Karen?
Excellent.
Great. As always, we'll go over our sponsors. Hopefully you can see them all. And yes, I will read all these every time, so settle in. Gold sponsors, Genentech and Prova Education. Our silver sponsors are ASIM, Forefront Collaborative, Global Academy for Medical Education, Platform Q Health Education, and bronze sponsors, ACHL, Clinical Care Options, Semiology, Helio Education Lab, Highmark CE, Impact Education, Integritas Communication, Connective, Primary Care Network, PVI, and RMEI. I think I even said all of them correctly. 3 ways to ask questions, as always. 1, you can use the Educational Measures text line to send in a question, 267-6660-CME. You can also click on the Google Slides link, which is found on the live page. I think it's right underneath the video. If you go there, there's a little link. Click the one beside my name. It's actually, no one ever uses it for whatever reason. It's a really easy way to ask questions, and we do look at it. So if you want to try it out, feel free. Or you can always tweet your question using the CME Palooza hashtag, which is also a pretty easy way to do it. And I'll be monitoring the questions throughout. And last but not least, our speaker disclosure slide. Opinions, discussions, and/or conclusions expressed are our own, and they do not represent an endorsement by or a position of our employer, its parent company, or affiliates. With that, I think I will turn things over to Karen. So Karen, take it away.
Thanks, Derek. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. When Derek first emailed me with the title of this session, I just responded with, yes, I'm in. I always like some chocolate chip cookie dough, and then realized I'd committed to doing some work. But the title and the concept behind this session intrigued me because in my time as a supporter, it was something that we were continually challenged with. How do we how can we work with the CME community to encourage physicians to participate in more creative activities, but also come up with concepts that are impactful, that we'd be able to show the value of those. The statements in this session description are pretty strong. And as we open this session, we'll talk to the panel about how we've come to that conclusion and is innovation needed, and if so, what that should look like. So I'm delighted to be joined this morning by 3 people who I think probably need minimal introduction to folks in the CME community. Angelo Carter, Director and Grant Officer at the Global Medical Grants and Research Collaborations Group at Pfizer. Samantha Koth at Sanofi, where she has the position of Associate Director of Medical Affairs Operations. And Helen Kostarides, who's consultant in the Medical Education Grants Group, supporting the oncology franchise there at Lilly. So thank you all for joining me. And Helen's working on a phone, I think, this morning. So we have to put her on a pedestal just yet. We might at the end of the session. So I'd like to start off, Angelo, with you. Why is this topic of interest to you? Do you have any particular challenges in your company that pushes you to seek more creative solutions? Or what has your experience told you about our ability as a community to lose the vanilla, so to speak?
Thanks, Karen. I think as an industry as a whole, we need to advance to demonstrate impact. You know, with the advent of new technologies, increased information, the same old becomes kind of outdated. There's a need to innovate in medical education as a whole. I think there's an opportunity for medical education to really be that go-to source of quality information through impactful education. So, I just look across in our industry with so many different ways for communication and ways that, whether it's healthcare professionals or if it's patients, they're always seeking new information. And I think to keep up with the times, there is that need. You got to keep up with the times or you become irrelevant. So I think this session is very important when you talk about innovations, learning what's out there, ways that we all can be more effectful and impactful.
Great, thank you. Helen, from your perspective, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think with the advances in technology today, it's changing the way people just do things in general. I mean, look at what's happening to the brick and mortar stores these days. And if you think about it, how many of us are without a mobile device these days that we're not attached to the hip with it? So with all these advances that are coming our way that are actually just changing the way people live their lives these days, I think from a CME perspective, we need to keep up with that pace. Being missing out on some pretty key opportunities that we can educate, especially the folks that are coming in from medical education school and continuing through their residency and actually getting into practice. I think we're going to be missing out some opportunities there because I'm pretty confident that's what they're seeing right now.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I think it's true. I mean, I think we're getting so used to creative ways that information is delivered to us in all aspects of our lives as well, not just in education channels. If we go back to, doing the same old in that world, it's a little jarring, and maybe particularly for younger clinicians coming into the mix as well.
Absolutely.
Samantha, you work in a smaller organization and have some maybe niche areas of interest as well. Would you like to comment on what you're seeing around creativity?
Yeah, I mean, I think back actually to when I got invited as well to do this. And unlike you, I was sort of confused at the title because I happen to love vanilla ice cream. But there's a little ice cream place that opened up around the block, and they serve like a kind of the equivalent of a Blizzard where you add things to the vanilla ice cream. And now when I go in there way too much, unfortunately to admit, I started kind of deviating from that. And I put Oreo cookies in my ice cream or Kit Kat into my ice cream. And I realized, people can change their behaviors, right? And so I think when I think about innovation, first off, I think about what does that actually mean? And I know we'll get into that later on. But the second part is being able to work with the learners to actually change their perception of what education should be and how it should be delivered. So there's really two balances that I struggle with when reviewing proposals. But as a small company, it's the same battles that everybody has in larger companies. How do we explain the value of this new innovation to our committees that are reviewing these proposals?
Mm-hmm. And I like the way you put it there, because at the heart of it, there's vanilla ice cream, right? So the foundation needs to be strong, right? The basic tenets of adult learning, the standards that we need to work to have to be there, but it's what it can be wrapped in or topped with that perhaps is a creative challenge. So keeping the ice cream analogy going here for a few more minutes, building the perfect ice cream sundae of a CME activity, if you will, we need more than one thing to think about, right? So what are we specifically talking about here when we ask for better flavors or the wow factor for our CME sundae? We touched on technology already, and we'll come back to that later in the discussion, but maybe there's more of that involved as well. Are there other ingredients or toppings, your Kit Kat and your Oreo cookies there, on our ice cream sundae that we should also highlight at this point, so that we don't discount those other factors as well? Because as we know, CME and reviewing CME proposals, is multifaceted. So Samantha, if I stick with you and come back to you first on this, and thinking about either new ways to deliver information that maybe in a more traditional format, or instructional design principles, is there an opportunity for providers to be creative and innovative there?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's opportunities for providers to be creative and innovative everywhere. But I think I think what we need to kind of address first is the idea of what is innovation, because people are confused by that. So I get a lot of proposals with all these different aspects and elements, high technology added in, virtual reality. You have to support this program because it's got virtual reality. Well, what is that virtual reality going to do? How is it going to impact the program? Then you see things that are so low cost and low budget, but they're super innovative in a way that they are really going to make a difference, and they claim they're really going to make a difference in the end of the impact on the outcome. So you need to see that balance, and you really need to see it in the proposal. The proposal is where it starts, and that's all we have to work on. So I think it's important to note that innovation can be high tech, it can be creative, it can be sexy, it can be fun, it can be just different. But why are we doing it? What is it going to do to the program that's going to make a difference?
Yeah, that's great. I recently became aware of a format. I have a client that's got rare disease interest, and we were talking to some providers, and they were talking about a format that was literally one-to-one. An expert and a clinician getting on the phone. I mean, you can't get more low tech than that. And okay, talking about some standard content, but that was important for that area because it's not about reaching the masses. It's about reaching the clinicians who matter for those rare patients who may struggle to find the right people. So I think your point is absolutely right. It's like matching it to the need, thinking about what you need to achieve, and then it's not always about the latest technology. Angelo, people are also becoming more creative in how they're measuring the impact of their CME activities and approaching outcomes in new ways. And I think our outcome studies can be less vanilla too. Are you seeing new ways that people are going deeper there?
Yeah, I would agree with you with your initial comment. I think there's times with outcome studies that it becomes very cookie cutter, where you just see the kind of standard pre-post type of testing, 90-day type of follow-up. But I think there's ways that we could track physicians' behaviors differently, or really keen in and focus on there. Can we incorporate payer data? Could we look at more at control groups? Could we segment different populations to really look at what's the impact of the education that's there? So could we start to shift away from just some of the standards to really evolve and show that meaningful type of piece of data and really add on when it comes to outcomes data?
Yeah, I think I've oftentimes seen some great innovation in design or delivery, and then a very standard pre-post and follow-up survey that's either not harnessing the data from within the activity itself. So if it's a data-rich format, that could provide you much more insights to what's going on. So you kind of lose, it doesn't gel, right? You get this amazing program and kind of more bland assessments. So it should pull all the way through. Helen, one thing that we hear, and I would imagine specifically in the oncology arena, is the need to bring the patient voice into CME. And we are seeing more providers including maybe patient education materials as assets for their clinician learners, or assessing patient needs and needs assessments. Should we go further with including the patient voice?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's safe to say that the patient is in the center in what all of us do, whether you're in industry, whether you're in a provider. I think everybody agrees that the end result for anything that we're doing is for the benefit of the patient. In my mind, I just see that as being some low-hanging fruit that is so underutilized and untapped right now. Why wouldn't we want to include the patient voice there? And the other thing that pretty much comes to mind for me is look at the patients that are in our clinical trials and the mountains of information that our researchers get back just from clinical trials. So why does it have to stop there? Why can't we continue to include that patient so we can evolve continuing medical education to help everyone benefit from that? And if you give me just a second to indulge, I've got a really neat story to tell. A couple of years ago, I was at a symposium at a conference, and one of the panelists was actually a patient, an actual patient, and this person was an artist. But this person was so involved in their treatment and knew everything about what this disease was doing to her body, knew everything, every detail about what the treatment was that she was getting in her, to help conquer her disease, that if you walked into that symposium late, you would never know whether or not she was an actual patient or she was faculty. And even to the point where she even stumped the faculty member who were clinicians. And so that kind of thing is very, very impactful. I think it's impactful not only for the patient himself, but even for that aha moment that clinicians can get as well, things that they can learn from a patient. So I think we're remiss by not including the patient voice, and I think it's something that's very, very valuable.
Has anyone ever seen a patient identified as an advisor or director of a CME activity, as opposed to, maybe, being one in a panel, but having a really strong role in the development of the program?
I haven't seen one as an actual advisor. I've seen maybe patient advocacy groups be part of it, but an actual patient to be an advisor, I haven't experienced that either in any proposals that I've seen.
Right. Well, thank you for that. So when we are trying to actively seek to support activities that are more innovative, there is a challenge in how we can communicate that maybe compliantly to the provider community. Angela, would you like to comment on how you address that in your work?
Yeah, for my time in looking at how we proactively communicate, whether it's through a call for grant type of application or RFPs, we try to be as specific as possible for what types of programs that we are looking for. So actively communicating what's in the literature and being as transparent as possible, I think is important from a as a supporter side to help stimulate those types of proposals that come in. I think that passive type of approach, just waiting for types of proposals to come in, is kind of hit or miss. I think being as transparent to call out when there is the appropriate time for that innovation is important if your organization allows that. And, for my time, those are the types of things that we are actively looking to do, to really call that out, to be specific and have that type of communication.
And I think it obviously depends on your corporate policies if you're permitted to have, discussions with people. But in the past, I recall, the team that I worked with, we spent a lot of time giving feedback to the provider community on what our observations were and what was working and what wasn't working. We were able to see what was moving the needle. And even if you can just say, this is not getting us there, try something different. If you can't, be more directive than that. But we have a lot of, we're very lucky in the supporter seat to have exposure to all of that data. So we've mentioned technology a couple of times, so let's go into that a little bit deeper now. When we think of new technologies, these can be very seductive and very exciting. Is there a risk to chasing innovation or use of technology for that novelty's sake? Samantha, you touched on this already. Would you like to comment on that further?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important to, again, just going to stress it, to explain why what you're proposing makes sense to the learners, to ultimately the patient. Providing a summary is also a great thing, because a lot of times, you look at a proposal and I can't make sense of the proposal in terms of where it's leading to and why you're putting it there. It's really hard for me to explain it to the committee. They rely on me to be able to do that. So having a succinct summary in the proposal outlining what you're proposing, why you came up with it, even if it's something that it's never been done before. Even more so, you need to be able to explain to us why you're putting it there, why you think it's going to work. Relating things to real world examples are always really helpful. And tying it to the needs assessment as well. The whole proposal needs to tie together. And if you can't summarize in 2 or 3 sentences for me how it's going to take place and happen, it's really difficult for me to communicate it internally. I hope that answers the question. I mean, I've got a ton of examples of really great innovation that was difficult for me to explain, and I had to basically sell my committee on it. And when I did, in the end, luckily it worked out, and it was very cool and very exciting and made a difference. But it's a challenge on an ongoing basis to do that. Again, they might see big dollars, high technology. Why is it there?
Yeah. So it's going back to maybe even the basics of, cognitive science and learning principles. I mean, why is this way going to work? How is it engage your learner? And I would imagine, I mean, is it acceptable if there isn't data already in the CME world, but there's data on how such technology has been accepted or proven in other arenas that could be incorporated?
I think it's okay to tie that in as well. Don't be afraid if it's from a different type of education delivery. If it's something that's being used in high schools worldwide, it's okay to tie that in as an example and rationale for why we're trying to do what we're trying to do.
Right. Sometimes I think, I know there are specifics around, physician and other healthcare professional educational needs, but sometimes we treat them like they're different. They're a different group of human being and how they learn. That's not necessarily the case. And Angelo, when we were talking in our planning discussions, you had made some really good points about, again, using things appropriately and at the right time. Do you think people kind of jump on things because they're the latest, or it's the latest buzz or fad, or?
Yeah, I think at times what you'll see is there'll be momentum that moves when somebody hears of a latest innovation or something new and feel the need to just incorporate it in because it is the latest buzz or something that's moving. I think when it comes to innovation or you're trying to incorporate something new, you really got to know your audience. It really has to fit into the story. Don't put innovation in there just to say it's innovative. Not everything is being innovative. It has to make sense. It has to fit in to the nature of your story. As you had said earlier with the outcomes piece, there's times where you see a disconnect where you have the need has been established, learning objectives that are there, and then something falls short. It's the same thing for innovation. I think it has to be used appropriately, of how you're using it and why you're using it. Does it add some additional type of value to the particular type of program that could lead to certain type of results? So again, I would stress that to anyone. Don't throw in something just because. Make sure that it makes sense for the particular type of activity or initiative that you are looking to complete. To go along with that, I think there's times where an innovative piece may get thrown in as a separate kind of just tactical type of one-off type of piece. And groups need to think longer term, think strategically of how you may be able to use and incorporate that information into future programs to build upon that. Don't look at it as, hey, I'm gonna just throw it in there for the time being for this particular initiative, but how does this really translate in the longer term to lead something down the road? We know that one program is not going to make a difference of changing behavior. You have that whole cycle where you need the multiple type of exposures and timing. So if you do fit this in where there may be an increased cost, look at ways of how you're going to incorporate that down the road if you were to continue on certain successes in a particular program or initiative.
Great. And if I could link what you just said maybe to one of the questions that's come in, asking about needs assessments that support a proposal and when would you consider, a plain vanilla base requirement? What do you think is the cherry on top? I think we've just addressed it there. It's like really linking every piece, not just the scientific need, but what are the known learner preferences for that audience?
Mhm.
What makes that amenable to the format that you're proposing? And then ideally, if you have evidence for that, all the better. But I think that certainly in my experience, I saw, sometimes it felt like different people in an organization wrote different parts of the proposal. And it needed like a little buffering out to make sure that there was pull through from the start to finish, and then it all hung together. Now, I think supporters, and this is a general statement, we say supporters look for innovation, providers try and give it to them, and then supporters say, well, that's new, it's not proven. We need to balance this innovation with knowing that we're going to or anticipating we're going to have some level of success. So when you're presented with a new or a novel creative educational activity type, how do you socialize this internally? Because you don't make decisions independently and, in a vacuum. You've got other stakeholders you need to convince and champion your programs to as well. So how can you get support from Grant Review Committee or other internal influencers when you're coming with a novel concept? And Helen, I think you shared with us a cool example of something that you did in your group.
Yeah. I remember when the proposal came in and the sticker shock price that came along with it, and I thought, holy smoke, how am I going to get this one to get passed by the committee? So I just put my head together. I started thinking, where do I need to start first? And I thought, probably the best place to start is at the top with the people that have that hold the purse strings. And so every year around the June timeframe, I have these mid-year review updates with key stakeholders in the oncology business unit. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to stick this in the agenda. So I went through the normal process, but I thought, what I'm going to do a little bit differently here. And to go back a little bit, I did ask the provider if they could send me a link, 3D technology with it. And they did, thankfully. And I had the 3D glasses. I popped some popcorn before the meeting, got the little red and white boxes. And when it came time for that session, I just told everybody, I've got a little surprise for them. Here's some popcorn, sit back, relax, put your 3D glasses on and watch this clip. And lo and behold, everyone just fell in love with it. They thought it was a nice new advancement to some education that can be very much enhanced. And so we went forward with it. And the results that came out of that, or the outcomes that came out of that program, were amazing. I mean, I got feedback in the evaluations report that said that the learners actually appreciated the 3D technology because it enhanced their understanding of signaling pathways. It enhanced their understanding of how therapies worked. They even were able to turn that program around and make a physician-patient communication toolkit where physicians were able to use that technology with their patients, and how it even enhanced patients' understanding of what the disease is that's going on. So it was very, very successful. I was pleased that I was able to get the funding for it internally. But again, let me tell you, I did go into it with being a little nervous Nelly about it.
Wow. I mean, I've never had such a fun, filled Grant Review Committee meeting in my experience. But I love what you did there, because what you were trying to get across was an experiential kind of learning format.
Right.
Gave them that experience. And again, what you were talking about with pathways, again, makes sense to me, that 3D format makes sense for communicating that kind of information. So it certainly seemed to tie together very well. And again, having the data then afterwards to confirm that it's not, wasn't just novelty and people getting excited about 3D, but it had the impact that you needed was great. Samantha, you had somewhat of a different experience to share, kind of socializing something internally.
And it was along the same lines, actually, of a 3D program as well, because again, it did come with sticker shock. And in order for, you know, my approach to be taken a little bit different with the committee, I unfortunately didn't think of the popcorn, which I think would have gone over pretty well, because usually we have these late day, you know, late afternoon meetings on a Friday. That's the only time I can typically get. So that would have worked well. But what I did was I spoke to the provider openly, and I said, you know, what value can this bring internally after the program is rolled out? You know, is it possible that this 3D video could be used for internal training? Could we, you know, have it for MSLs to be able to use on their laptops? You know, is there a way that there's some additional value that this could bring? Of course, we were not, again, part of the development or the concept or any of that, and it was after the program was completed. But it made it a lot easier to validate, you know, the value and the cost to be able to say we can leverage this internally too. So that was just me being creative in terms of getting it through. I knew that this would be benefit to the patients. I knew this would be a benefit to the learners, but I needed to get that cost passed on. So have we done anything with the video internally yet? No, we have not, but there are some discussions as to what we can do. But it was very, very exciting and much more well received when they saw a little bit more than they saw when they saw that huge sticker price attached to it.
Yeah. I had some similar experiences a few years ago. We were working in a pain space where there were particular educational needs, and our training team actually internally saw some things that we had supported through CME, and we're like, we're going to make our, I think they were account managers, take part in this CME activity because we couldn't produce this any better than what's there. So
why recreate the wheel if you're already paying for it?
Yeah.
Find secondary reasons to use it.
Absolutely. Angelo, any tips from big corporate world? How do you socialize your ideas internally? And I guess you have a global perspective, right? You've got an international focus.
Yeah, global as well. I think one of the key things for me is just the proactive communication with my internal stakeholders, right? So not waiting until a grant proposal comes in. So the sooner I know through communications with a number of different providers or something I observe at some type of conference, I don't just have meetings with my internal stakeholders to just do grant review, but to speak with them ahead of time, taking examples from other types of supported grants that may have been there, or ideas or concepts ahead of time. So I'm always looking for internal champions inside my organization, those individuals that can be my advocate, my voice, because I'm not at every single type of meeting, but to keep them, to keep medical education in mind at different ways that you can address different types of issues. So way before grants come in, I look forward to having conversations with a number of different individuals if they have ideas, not related to a specific grant request, but in general, if someone has a new way of what they're exploring or something that they've came across, I don't bite, talk to me, speak to me, let me know. And taking that information ahead of time is something that I found to be very effective, so that when you do get proposals that may have that kind of sticker shock or people's eyebrows raised of what is this, it won't be the first time that they're hearing about it.
Right.
So as a supporter, those are things that I'm always looking to do with my internal teams. And again, I stress that internal champions is a huge thing to do. And I would highly recommend that to anyone if you have new concepts or ideas. It doesn't have to just be in relation to a specific grant request, but help educate folks. Let them know what we're doing in our realm of medical education.
Yeah, and ask them, what are they seeing out there? On more than one occasion, when I was in your seat, I would have colleagues in other areas who were like, oh, we just had this great program. Everyone was in a steakhouse getting dinner and some guy was beamed in over Skype. And I was like, yep, been doing that for 3 years. Stop doing it, doing so well. Things that were being perceived as innovative. I'm actually really proud of the CME community. I think that oftentimes we lead the field in the medical education space more generally, because we're forced to innovate to survive. To hold on to our budgets. But, what are they seeing, and can we match, if it's not the direct experience, but the impact or the data from that? So we're getting a lot of questions coming in, and I'm trying to filter through them as we're discussing. So some of them I think have been answered in our discussion so far, but we're going to take a little bit of a break now to really talk about what tips you guys would have for providers when proposing new innovations or creative educational approaches to you, and how can they support you. I think oftentimes when we get an opportunity to have an industry panel there, everybody wants to hear, what do you need? And this is your opportunity as well for you to share, this is what I need from you to be able to do a better job to champion your program. And if you don't mind, I'll start off with a couple of the questions that have come through. So feel free to jump in, and then we can add to that. We've already talked about needs assessments. There's a couple of questions around needs. And I think we've already addressed, the need to tie the innovation back to not only the healthcare gap, but the audience and maybe even the venue or the delivery format. We also had a question about grants management systems that have limited space to describe your plan. What would you recommend to providers to do there? I don't know if that applies to any of your systems in particular, but sometimes people feel, I think, stifled that they can't get across everything they want to because of the way the applications are set up.
I mean, our system, we use the Polaris system. Our system is pretty easy to use. It does have a limited field in the application, but we encourage attachments. I would like to see and require actually the full proposal. And that's where some of our providers do put a summary page in the beginning of the proposal. It's the first sort of a snapshot, and I love those. Some providers can do a better job of enhancing those snapshots. Some are just literally just tidbits from the application, as opposed to a little bit of a summary that says why you're proposing this and what the ultimate goal is. Not just 3 learning objectives and the agenda and the time and date, but just if you, again, the elevator pitch, right? If you stopped me in the elevator and you have 30 seconds to tell me why I should support this, that's what I want to know in that snapshot, because that'll help me communicate it internally.
Right. And sorry, I was going to ask about like adding links or embedding, like a little video describing it or something like that. I mean, I know you can't do that sometimes in the system, but that could be shared in an email. Would that be welcomed?
Absolutely.
That's what I did when I did my little popcorn little presentation, because I asked for a link, to help with the committee and help with the key stakeholders. This is what it will look like with the 3D glasses. So that was very, very useful.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd be surprised that, most grant systems, they do have the standard static type of filling in certain spaces. But, from my experience, most systems allow for attachments. I mean, that's where a lot of the meat is that I usually go to when you're reading. So links, attachments, most systems have that capability to do that. And I would expect that to be included as part of a formal submission.
Right.
We've had a couple of questions around costs and innovation in outcomes and in delivery formats, and using technology can often come at a higher cost, and we've alluded to that already. The question here is, are you as supporters willing to accept that higher cost? Or I guess you could flip it as like, what the tips would you have for providers to, help you justify that internally?
I think with so many advances that are coming through with technology now, I think that cost can start to go down I'd be surprised if we're going to get a similar proposal for a normal 3D program without that cost being, decreased somewhat from what it was when I first initially got that proposal. And I think too, the other way to help offset that, and granted, I understand that some commercial supporters aren't there yet, but multi-support is something that will help everybody tremendously. So.
I think it's understood, with innovation and with technology, there is going to be an increase in cost for some of the types of platforms that exist. But again, as I said before, it has to make sense. It can't just be thrown in as a kind of an add-on. It has to make sense in the overall story for what an organization is looking to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And something that I look at is there that expansion type of strategy? If I'm going to support an expensive type of platform, did the organization do a job in explaining how this could lead to further use, or what they're going to, or what they hope or expect to get from using this type of innovation? Just to throw it in there to be a part of the program and not give me a vision to what someone is thinking, at times could make it difficult. There's times where I have what I call the so what factor. You sit back and you see something in a proposal and you go, okay, that's nice, but what does that mean?
Right.
And I think groups, if you are going to include that, you really need to explain what is your vision for including this. It has to make sense.
Mm-hmm. So someone just asked the question, sorry, Samantha, someone just asked the question, do stories help sell or describe innovation better than facts and figures? So is that what you're getting at, Angelo?
I think it's a combination. So I think if there's a story, if there's previous experience using the information or using this type of innovation, share that. Mm-hmm. I'm open to see how it was effective in another area or another type of setting, explain that, but also have the data to support it. What type of measurements did you receive from it, and how did you actually use it? So I think they go hand in hand. I don't think it's one without the other. I think it needs to, needs to be complete.
Samantha, I cut you off there.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say that I want to remind everybody too, innovation doesn't have to be expensive. Because we do get some proposals. I will be very open in what our budgets are, and I will tell people I don't have a lot of funding this year. What can you do that's different with so little money? So then they will come back with proposals and ideas. And there was one that we funded. We haven't funded it in many years, but it was called a virtual professor, and it was very cool because we were not able to afford to have a symposia at every Pri-Med meeting for primary care. But what we were able to do is to be able to support the virtual professor, which was just a very short, probably 15-minute, maybe 0.25 credit program that was set up in the hallways at these meetings. So in between on breaks and whatnot, learners could go and they could capture a little bit of CME, which was a case, basically. It was a case study. And they sat around and they were able to be interactive with this virtual professor. And it was very innovative and very exciting and very inexpensive, because once the program is built, you could roll it out at all of them. Right. And for a minimal fee, you were able to do that. And bringing it back to where we were internally, I actually brought them in with the virtual professor, and we had a lunch and learn series.
Right.
So, all in all, that was not expensive, and it was super innovative. So there are ways around the expense and the big ticket. I also wanted to just stress something that I meant to mention before, and this actually goes back to what Angela was saying, and something that was shared with us by Griselda, is that even if you do a smaller study where the ends are really small, you do some sort of CME program, maybe the one-on-ones with 30 doctors. It sounds like such a low number. And what's the committee going to say? 30 doctors. They look at their studies and they say, well, if they don't have 200 patients, it means nothing. 30 doctors can mean a lot when you can publish it and you scale it out. So publish it. Publish it where it needs to be published, to the right audience, so people see that this made an impact in this small group. Maybe we can scale it out. If without the publishing, nobody's going to know the outcomes of the program other than us.
I think something, I was going to just add on something. I think something else to keep in mind as we're talking about innovation. I think what people have to realize, you need to start, I call it kind of like the backwards type of approach, and it's a way how we approach our strategy. What patient outcome are you looking to have at the end of the day? So everything links back to the strategy, right? So I think a lot of times people are looking and starting with the tactic and the innovation first. And I think you got to go back to strategically, what are you looking to accomplish? And then you kind of approach, and then the innovation kind of comes on if it's appropriate, because I think everything has to link back to what are you looking to accomplish at the end of the day. And I think that's important for individuals to think about.
I think, yeah, you always have to bring it back. I mean, I've been watching some of the initiatives. So John Ruggiero, which is who's well known to everyone at Genentech, he's got an interest in regional variations in care. And we were talking about that recently. It's like, well, how do you extrapolate what's going on maybe in one healthcare system? He's also very interested in the systems model in CME. But how can we extrapolate that to a broader community? So again, back to your point, Samantha, I think you can have a small N, but if it's well designed and those insights are appropriately captured and interpreted, they can be extrapolated to a much wider community, but only if it gets out there. So we really need to leverage when something is done well, so that more folks can benefit from it. Even if it could be in follow-on education, but it could be just in communicating what is best practice, what they've learned from going through a prescribed and well-designed protocol, if you will. We had another question about innovation, because earlier on we talked about innovation in multiple ways. So someone asked the question, does the risk of grant rejection go up the more innovation the proposal has across the board? So if someone was like, okay, here you go, there's not an ounce of vanilla in this. You're getting all the bells and whistles. How would you respond to that?
I still love vanilla ice cream, so for me. But there's a time and a place for everything. You know, there are some, I think there's some audience groups, neurologists in particular seem to love didactic lectures. I mean, the feedback we get from symposia is they don't want bells and whistles. They want the data, they want the facts, they want to get in and get out and go back to practice. There are other groups that want more innovation. Nurse practitioners love innovation. I mean, that's what we're seeing from so many outcomes reports that we get. And anytime there's innovation involved, the nurse practitioners seem to love it. So I think know the audience, know the conference, know the venue, and what Angela is saying, just know your strategy from the get-go, and the innovation will follow.
And I think also had raised a question about a competence of the provider has to be mixed in with this as well. So, you know, in my mind, it would be crazy for someone to propose for the first time, you know, everything new. We've never worked in neurology before, and we've never used, you know, this technology before, and we've never taken it to this meeting before, and we've never had this outcomes model before. I think you have to have something that's grounded in experience and confidence is going to work.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the first things that I always advise my committee members of. If it's somebody that's brand new coming into the space and they really don't have any experience in the therapeutic area that I work in, I'm very hesitant in being the first to go out there and say, okay, let's give it a try. Hate to say that, but you know, when you're looking at the dollars, and you've got to be judicious on how you spend your dollars, you know, that's one of the first things I look at. So
I guess also, I guess I would just say that, you know, because we're talking about innovation, like I wouldn't discourage individuals from not trying something new. I would just say, just don't give me everything in the kitchen sink. Do a smaller type of pilot to be able to demonstrate it. I think that can go a long way. I'm always looking for new ways, new things that go. And I think, as we had said before, innovation doesn't necessarily mean higher costs. If you're trying something new, do it in a smaller scope to demonstrate how this worked, or and then again, fits back into that longer type of strategy to do something longer once you're able to demonstrate that.
You know, one other thing that I'd like to point out too is even though we've used some of the higher technology for some of these programs, there still is that vanilla piece that's in there. The high-tech part of the programs were interweaved into the vanilla discussions. So it's not all high-tech, you know, so there's still the vanilla discussions that are there.
Right, and actually, I'll jump to this question right now because I think it's a nice link. In our earlier discussions, we were talking about somewhat of a brand recognition sometimes that your internal colleagues may have for certain provider groups or certain formats. That could be professional societies, it could be medical education providers as well. So Helen, do you think there's a role for something that's tried, tested, and solid as part of your mix when you're putting your annual strategy together?
Absolutely, and I certainly would still like to see that. There are some organizations out there that are very much recognized. They have that brand recognition, and you know that the learners are going to migrate to that site or go to those programs, or whether simply because of who that organization might be. So very, very definitely, I would never, ever discount something like that.
Right. So, you know, we're not suggesting people throw everything out and start again. If it's
Absolutely.
tried, tested, and you know, you can continue to get the evidence to support it. That doesn't make it bad. So would you like to share some examples? People are asking for what do you consider innovative? And would you like to share some examples of innovation education that you've supported recently? And Helen, you've already mentioned the 3D glasses and the fact that you got the data to match your expectations. So you were happy with the decision you took there?
Oh, absolutely. And the other good piece to that is that first initial program has been repurposed. The content has been repurposed as well, and we were able to develop, or our provider was able to develop 2 additional programs that resulted out of that. And most recently, because this is such a niche area, it's hard to get the right learners to attend, and just got some feedback from them, or just some preliminary outcomes from them that just absolutely blew me away. Because we are now getting, you know, the right learners to attend these sessions because they have implemented the 3D technology into these settings, and it's just, I am just so pleased, so very, very pleased with the outcome. And again, you know, the cost went down because it's been repurposed a couple of different times, and content has been repurposed as well. So we've been able to use it, just, you know, updated.
Mm-hmm. So keep an eye on the efficiencies.
Absolutely.
Samantha, do you have anything other than 3D to share?
I had the virtual professor, which was obviously really exciting. But I also had, you know, there was a series of symposia for nurse practitioners, and we wanted to make sure that something was done innovatively, but we didn't have a lot of money. And the provider came forward with, going back to the patient piece that you were talking about earlier, came forward with an idea to have a surprise patient at the symposia, and it was so well received. They introduced the cases, they were real world cases, and at the end, you know, the real patient was actually brought onto stage and delivered part of the program, and it was like people were just beside themselves. There were actually tears in the audience because people couldn't believe that the patients they just were learning about and hearing about were here, and just bringing it into the real world element of it. And of course, not high cost, but innovative, right? So something different, a way to engage the learners, but it was, I shouldn't say not high cost, because symposia are always high cost, but not any more cost than we were used to, honoraria as usual.
So we're just coming up on the last couple of minutes. I think Derek was about to tell me that.
Well, yeah, I was going to say we have like a 2-minute warning, but you know, let's, do you have more you want to go over? Because what we can do is I can go over all of our little ending slides, and if you have a couple more questions you want to answer, we can run over and it'll be available then for the archive version.
I think we just wanted to really end with a question and maybe a challenge for the new community, for the community at large, and just ask Angelo to wrap up quickly. Are we missing anything that we haven't talked about here? Would you like to propose, something more radical for people to think about? Or is it just a general, flag drop to just be creative, think outside the box?
Yeah, I just think in general, I think, again, whether you're a provider or a supporter, I think there are things that we should look to be more creative. Could we do partnerships with other industries? And again, there's a lot of legwork that goes into some of these things. Could we partner with a Nike or Google or Apple, grocery stores? Are there other things that we could do that could help advance and improve patient care? So what's actually happening with all the stuff with technology and how can we reach folks? Are we not thinking broad enough? Should we be doing different things? Maybe it's radical partnerships, such as some of the things that I've mentioned, but I just think we need to continue to evolve and push and have those discussions. Again, I don't have the answers. And again, like as some of the questions have come in, there's definitely cost, there's time that goes into it, but I don't think it hurts to brainstorm as a whole as an industry of how do we continue to advance medical education and what we all do. And we need to start thinking more broadly as we, instead of just today, what does medical education look like in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and start thinking that bigger picture.
Great, thank you. So with that, we'll wrap up. I'd like to thank the panel for being so open in preparation for this session, as well as the time today. And Derek, I'll hand over to you to lead us out.
Great, and yes, thanks everyone. That was really great, and thanks to all the participants too. We had a ton of questions, and so I don't think we even quite got to all of them. And first session as well. So thanks everyone who's been sending in questions. It makes these sessions go a lot better. Not that this wouldn't have been good even without the questions, but anyway. Okay, so to close up really quick so Scott can bring up the next one. We do have a survey that we ask people to take if you don't mind. It's not required. It's not an evaluation. It's 7 questions. It'll take you 5 minutes. It's on the live page right where you're watching this video. It should be right underneath the video you're watching. You can just click on it. We also have, people have been asking about certificates for participating in CME Palooza. We're not accredited or anything like that, but I did put together a little certificate of attendance. If you want to self-report your participation, you can use it. There's a link as well, but I cannot verify your attendance or anything like that, so don't even try asking. And next, for the next session, which is our lunchtime session, if you're on the East Coast, which is sponsored by Genentech, is, I always have trouble saying this one, I already screwed up, forays into the 4 A's, promoting systems-based changes in CME. I think Scott made me say this one just so you know I'd screw it up. So that'll be coming up at noon Eastern, so like in 4 minutes you'll have to refresh your screen to see the next streaming video. And that should be it. So thanks again, everyone, and we will close out this session.
Great.